I'm going to go over the parts of the lab write-up so that you can pause and come back to it so you don't miss any information. Definitely take a look at and read the top part of each section. So for example, this. So what you'll want to do, you've already rolled your fingerprints using this video here. And once you have your prints, make sure you take a picture that is zoomed in that you can see the ridge pattern, because you will need to identify that. And it should be white background. I shouldn't see your table or desk or any other busyness behind it. And you're going to insert it inside each square. Make sure that it is upright when you roll the print. So you can always tell because the way that the waves are going, okay? So if it's like a loop, it's going to go like this and come out the side. And then if it's an arch, it's going to go like this. So that's what you're looking for when you position the print. Just don't put it in the square any which way, because then I have to turn sideways and etc. to try to identify it. So you're going to place all 10 prints inside this table, and then you're going to go through and you're going to identify the print. There's a document right here that goes into explaining how to identify the prints. Make sure you're very specific. So for example, if you have a loop, you could have an ulnar loop or a radial loop, in which case you would write ulnar loop, okay? And it'll show you how you can identify that. You look at your hand as if it's laying on the table, palm side down. If the open ridges is coming in from this side, okay, and it's your right thumb that you've printed, the ridges are pointing toward your thumb, so that is on your radius side of the bone, so that's a radial loop. If the open ends are pointing away from your thumb toward your little finger, that is the ulna bone, so it's an ulnar loop, okay? And again, you can open up this document, okay? So when you're looking at loop, swirl, arch, you're going to do a general classification, and then let me come all the way down here to loops. So now you see we've got the ulnar and the radial loop, and then you can identify it from that. But just make sure you know which way the open ends are pointing toward which bone, and that's how you will identify it. Okay, so you will fill in that table. Now moving on, this one we're going to look at what was the Henry Whirl method. So go back to that document, and on, I believe it's page 5, it will look at how you can calculate, and basically what does the fraction, if you want to look at it that way, was your prints based on the whirls, only the whirls. So as you go through and you've identified the top part, let's say my right index was a loop, so I'll write loop here, okay? And you notice they don't go in order, the same order. It doesn't go right thumb, right index. And the reason why, you're going to see a pattern. So the right index and the right thumb have the same value. The right ring and the right middle have the same value. And you'll notice it reduces in half each time. So there's a pattern to it. So after, and you don't need to be specific on this one. So maybe this is a whirl. Maybe this is an arch. Maybe this is a whirl. Okay, loop. And keep going. Anything that is a loop or an arch, you're going to put a value of 0, because we're only focusing on the Henry Whirl method. Okay, so when I go back to my document, and let me go all the way down, so here it is. And so what you're looking at, if you notice here, the right index and the right thumb has a value of 16, and then in half, right ring, right middle is 8. So I know that my right ring was an 8 and this was an 8. And let's say that this was also a whirl. Okay, so it's going to go 16, 8, 4, 2, and 1. Okay, now let's say, for example, you have absolutely no whirls. They're all zeros. You'll notice here in this gray box, no matter what you added your row across, you need to add 1. So you will never have a 0 in either one of these last column. It could be a 1 over 1 if you have absolutely no whorls, but it would never be a 0 over 0. Okay, so I will add that across, and so we'll say that that's also a loop or an arch. So it'll be 8 plus 1 is 9, okay, and then this is going to be a 2 here, and I'd fill in those other spots. So that'd be 8, 9, 10, that would be a 9 over 11. Don't reduce, okay? And so what they do is they will do a quick identification of the print cards at the question. This is what they used to do. Now computer does everything for them. And then they will go through and apply this really quick whirl method and pull out the ones that have the similar fraction. Then they'll go in and start looking at the ridge characteristics, the more detailed, the forks and the bridges, etc., and making sure that they're at the same location. So, but this gives a quick sort. And then you just write your first and last name up here because it's the primary classification for you. Okay, so moving on, so question 2, or directions 2, this goes with this down here at the bottom. And you definitely want to zoom in on this. You're going to use your red inked pen and you're going to draw a circle around ridge characteristic. Now, how do I know what my ridge characteristics are? I'd go back up to this document, and the ridge characteristics are right here. So a ridge characteristic would be ending ridge, short ridge, fork, delta, bridge. Those are all ridge characteristics. The common ones that you will always find would be delta, ending ridge, short ridge. Those are very characteristic. A fork, I've seen very few crossovers, a few enclosures, but those are the big ones. So let me go through and explain some of the difference between these two. So these two, they look kind of close to one another. So on that, you'll notice that when I'm following my ridge, okay, I'm following along, and then that middle one has to start about the same area, and then it stops or it ends. So it's an ending ridge, okay? Now if I have two ridges along, and then I have one that's kind of out in the middle by itself, that's a short ridge. Don't get confused with an island or a dot. That is a larger area, and you also got to be careful. Sometimes the ink will leave a mark like that too. So if you're not sure, go and find another ridge characteristic. The difference between a fork or a bifurcation and a hook would be you'd have a ridge and then it forks off into a Y. Okay, it makes a fork. Or a hook, the ridges are pretty close and then it comes off of it like that. Okay, so that's the difference between those two. Enclosures in an eye. On these, you'll notice that the enclosure, that it is connected right here on both sides. Okay, so people sometimes get the dot or island mixed up with the enclosures. So look carefully to see if those lines come together on both sides. If there's nothing in it, it's an eye. If there's a dot or a line, it's an enclosure. Okay, whereas the dot island, that's the same term, it's not, the ridges have not come together. So hopefully that'll help. That will give you some possible ridge characteristics. So let's go down to the directions here. So what I want to do is I'm going to look for a total of 5 different ridge characteristics. I just gave you several, okay? And you're going to look at all of the prints collectively. So I've got 6 prints you can choose from. You're not finding 5 in each print. You are not. I just want to see a total of 5. So you could have 3 in one print. You can have 1 in one print. 2 of them may not even be marked. Okay, so what I want to do is you're going to get as close as you can possibly get, and you're going to go to your fine ink on your pen, red, and make it small, okay? And then you're going to go and you're going to start looking at the lines. Well, already I see an ending ridge, I see a fork, okay? So let's just pick one here. So let's say that these are pretty close. So I'm looking right here. And you notice how I drew it so it's dead center, okay? If I drew a circle and it was like that, okay, so I've got a fork and I have an ending ridge in there. I'm not giving you credit for two inside one circle. So what I want to do is you're going to draw like that. Oop, that wasn't very good. Draw it. There you go. And then you're going to write fork. Okay? And then if I see some other ones in that one, then I can go ahead and mark it. If anything doesn't jump out at me, then I can move on to my next print and see if there's anything. So maybe I want to look for a delta, okay? Or maybe I want to look for an ending ridge or a short ridge. I probably wouldn't choose anything from here because it's pretty blurry. I wouldn't choose that area. Moving on, so I can keep looking. So when I'm done, I should have a total of 5 that are marked out of these 6. Only 5 that are marked, not 5 for each one, 5 total. Okay. Next, we have to collect the data from our class. And for this, I'm going to be asking, what is your right thumb? And I just need to know, is it a loop, whirl, or arch? Okay. I may just do a show of hands. I may set up a Teams channel. We'll just see how it's going during that day. So if we have 25 people in the class, you know, then we'll count up how many has your right thumb as a loop and how many has it a whirl. Once we have those numbers, then you're going to find the percent of the class that have the loop. Make sure that this equals 100%. Okay, very important. And also make it to the nearest whole number. So when you divide it out, if it's like 25.3, make it 25. Round accordingly so that that equals 100. So can't do that until we get the class data for the right thumb. This one is, you're going to be dusting one print, and it doesn't matter which hand, which finger, is the technique that I'm looking for. And so you're going to use a microscope slide, and you're going to touch the slide, you're going to use powder, you're going to lift it and put it on paper, and you're going to take a picture of it, and it's going to fit inside the box. Then you're going to write which finger it is here in the yellow. And then you can always double check yourself because you've already rolled the prints on the first table. And then you will just simply highlight or circle in red the pattern where you can refer back up to table 1 if you're not quite sure. Make sure that this picture is inserted in the box and that it is situated the correct way. It's not sideways. Okay, for the lab reflection, this one you can also go back to that document that I opened, and you don't need to be in complete sentences, okay? If your handwriting's not that great, you know, type it would be wonderful, but what did you use to identify each ridge pattern? Well, if it was a loop, I should see keywords like open-ended ridge pointing toward, and tell me which finger, or you can say which bone. Okay, so the open ends of the ridges are pointing toward. So that's something. Also, another thing about loops is that the ridge will enter one side and then come back out the same side. An arch, on the other hand, the ridge will come in one side and exit the opposite side. Okay, so look through it and find keywords. Okay, this is a very common mistake right here. See, people shorten things. Central pocket loop whirl is all together. So if you have that particular ridge pattern, it always looks like a balloon. Okay, the ridges come in, they go in the center, and they come right back out. Okay, and so a lot of people will just shorten it and go central pocket loop. Well, then when you're doing the Henry whirl method, you forget that is actually a whirl, and then your whole value is messed up. So write out everything: central pocket loop whirl and double loop whirl. Double loop whirl always looks like the characteristic S. A tinted arch, you have your ridges like this, and you'll have a pole, and it looks like it's the pole to a tent. That's how you can tell that. It needs to be a vertical pole, by the way, okay? You may have some ridges and they're going like this, but then you have one that's kind of looks like a pole, but it needs to be a vertical ridge to be a tinted arch. So those can be bulleted, that's totally fine. For this one, you're going to distinguish between fingerprints and fingerprinting. So there's a difference. Fingerprints are ridges, characteristics, all that identification part, and the printing is the technique, either the rolling or the dusting. So what did you discover you didn't know before? So as long as you keep those two straight in your answer, you'll be fine with that one. The last one, you are going to use what you've done on collecting the latent prints. You're at a crime scene, you've been called to a bank, so a bank robbery, no witnesses, side door broken into, the cash drawers are black in color, very important, okay, and then it was all broken into, the cash was missing, etc. So you're going to go through, you've already arrived on the scene, and you're getting ready to process the scene. So what must you do? Make sure you include the powder color. If you don't know the different colors of powder, Google it, okay? But I can tell you, you probably don't want to use black on black. It will not show up. This does need to be in complete sentences. You can handwrite it as long as your writing is nice and neat. Typing it would be fine too. It doesn't matter to me, okay? So that wraps up the lab report. And then when you are done, just double check you have everything. This is an individual lab write-up. And then it's worth 60 points. Make sure your name's on it. You're going to move it under needs to be graded. And then you will turn it into teams. Any questions? See me. But I just walked you through the entire lab write-up.